Since people put funny leaves in pots and started muttering magical words, humans have been obsessed with spells, and that makes a ton of sense. The idea that I could utter some arcane phrase or look at a dusty tome and change my life is incredible to think about. But here's the thing, whether we're talking about high fantasy wizards or whatever the heck is going on with these dragons right here, the truth is if we were to take real magic and transport it into the actual world, it would change everything. And today, we're going to talk about what magic would obliterate the world. Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle. I'm the dork that makes you find folks the desk, and you're watching Desks and Dorks. We bring you indie tabletop content, usually with a historical bent. A couple of things. One, we got a Patreon, $10 a month. You get in on the ground floor of our upcoming Paleolithic role-playing game, which at this point, almost 200,000 of you have watched the video about. That's insane. Also, we have a YouTube membership program. Both Patreon and YouTube membership get you access to exclusive special content you can't get anywhere else. And if you become a member, you get some lovely rat-themed emojis. Also, a hype, a like, a share, a comment, and especially a subscription all go a long way to letting YouTube know this is the kind of content that you enjoy, especially as we are swiftly on the march to 50k subscribers. Now, here's the thing. Every video, I ask you a weird question, and usually I've got a lot of time to wait and see what the last question was in the video. I will be at Gen Con by the time this comes out, so I'm going to ask you a question that has plagued humanity since the very beginning. Is a hot dog a sandwich? And with that out of the way, let's begin with what we're going to be discussing today. The criteria is pretty simple. I'm going to be using my understanding of medieval history through my studies to become a medievalist, and I'm going to be breaking down what I think would be the best schools of magic or types of magic to change the world. I'll be evaluating them on 3 different axes. 1, impact. I want to know, or I want to pick spells that I think would have the most global, dimension-shifting, reality-warping impact on human history. 2, change as a result. How would the world, the real world, actually shift as a result of the kinds of magic that we would introduce into this space? Are they societal effects? Are they structural effects? Again, this is pure conjecture, but that's kind of the fun part. I'll interpret what that might mean in a fantasy world based on the Middle Ages. I think it'd be kind of interesting to say, hey, if you take stock fantasy world number 6 and you introduce, I don't know, automatic laser machine guns into the equation, what would that do? And lastly, I do have a couple final caveats. 1, I know quite a lot of you enjoy Dungeons & Dragons. This is not a Dungeons & Dragons channel, so everything here will be system and setting agnostic. This means you're not going to hear Magic Missile, you're not going to hear the greatest spell of all time, which is prestidigitation in any role-playing game. None of that. I have no interest in using this particular system. 2, while I do know that some of you love flashy spells like Fireball, that's probably not going to be here. Shockingly enough, human development is more than just who can put more of us into the ground or return more of us to life's proverbial lobby. And lastly, magical abilities or spells that have both modularity and adaptability are going to get massive upgrades in terms of how I think they would impact things. For example, while the A10 Warthog machine gun is an insane invention and incredibly powerful and good at what it does, no one is going to argue that this had a bigger change on human development than something like the simple dagger or the humble spear. Got it? Good. With that out of the way, let's talk about the 3 types of magic I think would have the biggest change on a fantasy world. Lastly, because it's a bit of a Gen Con tradition, I will be ending each of these sections with a funny history hot take. Look, history is bizarre, fantasy is bizarre. It was one of my favorite things that we did last year at the end of our What People Get Wrong with Low Fantasy video. You all seemed to love it. I enjoyed it. We're going to be doing it again. And with that out of the way, let's talk about our first one. And I honestly genuinely believe that the most important type of spell in this universe would be anything that gives us an understanding of germ theory and allows us to destroy it. Yes, I'm not interested in Summon Lightning Bolt. I am far more interested in the all-powerful conjure chlorine spell. Here's the thing, right? There is nothing in human history that has had more of an impact on us as a species, on the development of our societies, the changing of our world than germs. Now, while germs are an ever-present part of our world's development, especially our species development, nobody got it worse than the Middle Ages in a lot of ways, which gets bookended by two of the worst plagues in recorded history. 542 ACE, you get the Justinian plague that starts in Constantinople and eventually ravages most of the world. That's Black Plague Part 1. And then in 1348, you get Black Plague Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, where it basically ravages the entire world. We get the dope plague doctor masks. It's a really good time. But seriously, germs have changed everything. It's the number one cause of casualties during times of war. It has resulted in more political upheavals, more regime changes and regime shifts that I can shake a jewel-encrusted scepter at. It has altered the course of entire religious movements, and frankly speaking, it gets so much worse because of those things, because it's unable to be dealt with on a global level, right? Here's the thing. When you're dealing with a traditional fantasy world, the breakdown of social order and the issues in bureaucracy and bureaucratic management make germ theory and the control and attacking of a disease so much more difficult. Conversely, not only does it make it more difficult, it makes it harder for you to gather into those societies that would be perhaps better at tracking and exterminating it. However, here's the thing. If we were to create a system where every, town healer and hedge witch has the ability to battle back against the plague, that has massive, and I mean massive, knock-on effects with how things would change and develop. And again, while the Industrial Revolution, the rise of germ theory in the 15 and 1600s, and advances in modern medicine have all contributed to both our species' understanding of germs and the gradual change against them, if some weirdo in a purple robe could snap his fingers and the bacteria in your gut would just disappear, that would change everything. And this would make essentially not a utopia, but it would drastically accelerate society's development in ways that you and I probably could never even begin to predict. It would be like super gluing the gas pedal of societal development to the floor, sticking a brick on that, and then layering the whole thing in tungsten. Literally, we're going off the rails. It's too fast, too furious, humanity drift. One of the things that I think disease has long kept in check is the population of people, right? This chart obviously is a little bit different. It goes back to 1300, which obviously a fair bit after the Middle Ages, but you get the idea. However, if we were to introduce, modern germ theory in like way earlier, the chart probably looks something like this, which is definitely made by a professional and not me in Paint 3D. One of the other things that I want you to consider is that one of the biggest issues with human societal development in general is waterborne illnesses. The contamination of drinking, bathing, and cleaning water happens to be one of our biggest ops. And if we have some sort of magic to eliminate those things, humankind gets better quick. And as humankind gets better, as we are able to sort of fend off these different foes, these essentially bacterial predators or viral predators, parasitic predators to our abilities, as a result, human beings just kind of grow so much faster. And I think that would be totally reflected in a fantasy world. My genuine headcanon with most fantasy worlds, like high fantasy ones, is that they exist in a post-germ theory existence, right? Waterdeep, for example, probably would never be able to maintain that level of population without a series of cyclical plagues culling those people over and over again, were it not for magic capable of defeating them. And I genuinely believe that is why most high fantasy worlds have so many soldiers to just fling into battle, because healing magic exists in general, but B, they don't have to worry about the biggest issue with those battlefields, which is the constant changing and shifting of things at the level of the microscopic. And that's massive. We can worry about things like dragon fire and steel and hammers and all kinds of stuff instead of worrying about, I don't know, we just camp outside of a city for a while and all of a sudden one man starts coughing and then the next second, half of the fighting force has been deleted, which has happened more times in human history than I can count. Not only that, but without having to focus so much on germs, I really do think that a fantasy world would be more populated with vast cities than it would with anything else. There's really nothing holding these population centers back at that point other than the resources needed to construct and the food needed to maintain its population. But still, that is a far easier hurdle to surmount than having to deal with germs on a daily basis. And now, of course, for History Take Part 1, if you know this channel and you know me, you know that I love Big Willie Shakes. Shakespeare is my dude. He is my favorite author of all time. He will probably be my favorite author of all time forever until he, I don't know, gets resurrected or something. Here's the thing, though. I think William Shakespeare would absolutely love gangster rap. I think I know that in my heart of hearts. I feel it in my soul, right? Shakespeare, if you've never studied or enjoyed any of his work, happens to be, I'm gonna swear, which is not usual for the channel, he's one of history's greatest shit posters, okay? I don't think you understand the sheer amount of dick jokes, lewd blowjob humor, and just insane stuff that he just kind of wheedled into all of his work, right? You gotta understand, Shakespeare might have presented his stuff to the upper class, but this was a man of the commons, okay? If there's not a dick joke every 5 minutes, the peasantry is getting bored, right? One of my favorite things is the use of the word leak. Obviously, the leaks like these, but leak is basically, when you hear a leak in Shakespeare's work, he's talking about a male penis. And honestly, if you read any of Shakespeare's work, there are so many leaks, it might as well be a VeggieTales episode. And into this, with these understandings kind of done, I want to introduce what I think Shakespeare might be his favorite rapper of all time, and that, my good friends, is Little John. Because to the windows, to the walls, you know how the rest of the song goes. But Shakespeare is also known to put live music into his performances. I'm not saying that I need Get Low with the East Side Boys in there, but I'm just saying put that song and superimpose it over Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, any of the scenes with John Leguizamo, and you can't tell me that he wouldn't love Little John. That's my first history take, and I'm standing by it. I will die on that hill, I think. With that out of the way, let's talk about spell type number 2. And this means that we are going to be talking about food spells. Now, I realize that sounds pretty vague, pretty general, but what I'm really talking about is anything that improves the nutritional value or the cleanliness of food. Food that doesn't make you sick and food that is nutritionally diverse, shall we say. Look, I love magic swords. I love Excalibur. I love the Philosopher's Stone, but let's be real here, those magic artifacts would pale in comparison to something simple like baking soda if we were to bring it into the medieval world. This simple concoction alone probably would have saved thousands of lives and altered civilization, essentially as we know it. And honestly, I think this is best summed up by the great rapper and poet O.T. Genesis. Soda, soda. Thanks, OT. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the impact that food magic might potentially have. I want you to take a look at this skeleton right here. One of the things that you will notice is this skeleton bears all of the signs of malnutrition. And when we're talking about malnutrition, that's a pretty common thing, right? You and I intrinsically understand that there is a danger to not having access to food. But here's the thing, and this is what I truly think makes anything that improves the nutritional diversity of a food item really important, is that food is one of the most important things to every range of a person's development. Whether we are talking about the way that their brain develops, the way their body changes, their resistance to disease, to injury, to mental health problems, to organ function, all of these are actually tied to your food. And while all of the foods that I showed on screen earlier look delicious and sumptuous and are a good example of how diverse medieval cuisine could be, it does make sense that if we could make sure that all of the food was guaranteed nutritious and guaranteed safe, it would make a tremendous shift and make a tremendous development for the people who are most desperately in need of it. As this graphic shows right here, all of these different things, these minerals, vitamins, oils, nutrients that we would get are essential for our sustained health. And honestly, this makes a ton of changes if we can make it work. And what I really want to narrow in on is that in the face of much healthier and much more nutritionally dense and diverse foods, I think the arts actually flourish more than anything, right? Brain development is one of the things that you need good nutrition for. It's one of the reasons that we have finally, after, way too long, started to fund public school lunches for free here in the United States, which is a good thing. But imagine the strength of a base of artists, of tapestry makers, of painters, and poets if they don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from, or if that meal could have negative side effects. They could be something incredible, and who knows what that would do to a place culturally, right? I shudder to think at all of the artists, weavers, playwrights, poets, singers, and songwriters that we have lost over time to something as simple as moldy bread. And that, to me, is one of history's greatest tragedies. And honestly, I think that goes doubly true in a fantasy world, right? If you're not worrying about nutrition, and especially if we combine that with a world where disease is a foregone and forgotten conclusion, magic universities are going to go unbelievably hard. Like this one right here, which they seem to have captured me in the center of the picture. I mean, look, they even got my good side, right? But imagine like magical clothing being woven into things as simple as humanly possible when your cape isn't just a fashion statement, it's a weapon and a form of defense. It gives drip a whole new meaning, and genuinely, I think that's one of the coolest things. Consider toys for a moment, right? One of the earliest chapters of The Hobbit talks about all the incredible things that the dwarves are able to craft and fashion in the shadow of this mountain as they're making magical toys, the things that are like wind up wonders for the children of the world, and that's just absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible. I think if you make nutrition a cornerstone of a fantasy world, the knock-on effects and the improvement of the general life of regular folk would have drastic changes on everything. And in that world, I don't want to say it's a post-scarcity world because there's still going to be conflict, but if you're not worried about fighting for your daily bread, I think a game like that shifts its focus to be far more political in tone and cultural in nuance than one necessarily focused on the battlefield. All right, second history hot take. I really want to talk about the Romans for a second. I, like many people of a certain persuasion, do think about the Roman Empire probably more than I absolutely should. However, there is one thing that I've always wanted to do, other than make sure Hannibal Barca wins the Second Punic War. I know the Romans like their blood sport. I know they love the Colosseum. I know they love all of that. However, I want to watch the Romans the Romans watch Robot Wars. I think introducing the Robot Wars to the Roman populace would be like a drug level epidemic for them as a population. I know that some of you are probably thinking, Kyle, there's no way that the Romans, who are used to actual real violence, will love this. However, I just want to point out, in the American reboot of Robot Wars, you get to watch Mick Foley as he's yelling and screaming while Matilda shoves a giant buzzsaw into another robot and flips like 20 feet in the air, sparking and exploding and showering the ongoing crowd with like scrap metal. I think you show that to like one Roman plebeian and it's going to hit like an unbelievable amount. I think it's going to be one of the greatest things in the world. I also just want to see it happen. Imagine a bunch of dudes in togas watching Robot Wars. Who knows what could have been for the Roman Robot Republic. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about our third and final type of spells that I think would actually break the world. Real quick, actually, this is Editor Kyle. I had a bunch of people in the last couple of videos be like, whoa, hey, I thought you stopped making things. What the heck? These are really cool. Heads up, only about 8% of you who are subscribed actually have the bell notification turned on, which means if you like the stuff that Desks and Dorks is continuing to make, I would really appreciate if you hit the bell. YouTube, for all of its actually great things, doesn't always do a great job at letting your subscribers know when new stuff goes live. And again, if you already subscribed, hopefully you want to keep seeing the content. So do me a favor, hit the bell if you want to keep doing this, if this is the kind of stuff that you enjoy. Okay, anyway, I'm sending it back over to regular narration Kyle. Editor Kyle is saying goodbye. Bye, everybody. And that brings us to communication spells. Now, here's the thing. Communication has been, and always will be the greatest aspect of humanity. It's the biggest weapon in our toolbox. It is the strongest arrow in our quiver. Whether we are talking about signal fires, the Turing machine, those 2 paper cups with the string taping them aside. There have been many great advancements in communication, and any spell that helps to facilitate that is going to have an insane impact on the real world, right? I want you to think about that fact that most of the biggest critical tactical errors, whether we're talking about World War I or Napoleon's battles across Europe, happened because of critical failures in communication. I don't even want to think about the number of times that the loss of a signet ring or royal seal has spelled international disaster or cross-kingdom political problems because there's no real reliable way to send out communications, right? Anything, even if it's a simple 1-sentence spell that is transported across a kingdom mentally, would reverberate throughout all of history in ways that you and I can only dream about, right? Honestly, I understand that, like, you might be thinking, oh, what if it's an insane, powerful spell that lets me talk to everybody all at once? It doesn't even need to be that. I am genuinely convinced that the ability to rain fire down from the sky in limited ways wouldn't be as wide-changing to humanity as something like a text message. And honestly, considering the impact that something like a Discord server would have, can you imagine you put every medieval monarch from like 600 forward into a Discord server? A, I want those chat logs, and B, the amount of things that could get sussed out through that would be massive. Also, not a history hot take, but Eleanor of Aquitaine would be the Discord server's moderator. I absolutely positively know she would be. William Marshall probably would be too. If you know English history, you know I'm right. Anyway, I do want to talk about the changes that this would have as a result, because they are myriad, they are legion, and they are massive, probably almost more so, if not more so, than the Germs one, right? Think about somebody like Napoleon, whose basic skill wasn't being good at battle. His real power was being phenomenal at logistics, and this was a man who did it with rudimentary communication methods by modern standards. Give Napoleon Twitter, and he probably would still be ruling the world. If communication allows for the creation of, transportation ways, do we get cross-continental rail much sooner? More importantly, does Genghis Khan actually manage to outfit his own Mongol horde with special weaponized trains that they ride across the steppe to conquer people? I don't know, but that's entirely possible here. The Templars are another great example. These guys ran a communication and banking network from all the way in medieval England to Jerusalem and beyond. And again, they did it with rudimentary methods. If we give, a PayPal app essentially to the Templars, and we put it like one of those messenger bank functions inside of it, I guarantee you they are going to build mobile fortresses the likes that make Arasaka weep. I have no idea what massive magical shifts in communication would do to the world. I just know that the world we have now and the world that we have, if that was real, look like totally different things. Also, one more really cool aside, my boy Carl Makes Stuff actually told me about this in one of his podcasts that I did with him. But apparently, the Hospitallers had their own flotilla fortress. They literally made like a floating hospital ship, and then the entire order was basically based out of that fleet for like 20 some years. So it's possible we could do it with that stuff. I'm just saying, if you give the Templars Discord, they're probably going to conquer the world, which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd say as a grown person. All this is to say that any spell that helps to facilitate communication could change everything. Like, I actually want you to think about humans not as us, thinking, sentient, loving, and living creatures, but as animals, right? One of the things that separates us from other pack hunters and other apex predators is our advanced methods of communication. It's one of the ways that our ancestors was able to either dominate or subjugate much of the world around them. And genuinely speaking, anything that makes that easier is going to make us much, much more powerful. And frankly speaking, the fantasy impact of this is much the same. And there's a lot of things you can do about it, right? Like, you could make a world where like psychic magic and telepathy is everywhere, but I actually just kind of want to take it one step further. Instead of the usual gonzo direction, I just want you to imagine a mystery game, a whodunit, something along the lines of Clue that takes place in a town. Your players are trying to investigate a series of disappearances, foul play, something along those lines, and there's a lot of particular suspects. And the reason there are a lot of particular suspects is that everyone in the town is in on it, and they can all talk to each other mentally. Imagine the cluster, the absolute rug pull that that kind of a game would have. I kind of want to make it. It would be hard to GM, but it would be a ton of fun to be like, oh, everyone's a suspect because everyone can talk to anyone else at any given time. And that's the kind of aspect and shift that something like real communication magic, limited telepathy, a simple message spell, the ability to teleport a letter into someone's hand, anything like that would have on a fantasy world, and frankly speaking, on our world. And this brings me to my last and final history take. I think Carl Jung might actually like one of our role-playing games. Yes, Carl Jung, the guy who's a very controversial figure in psychotherapy, but I don't know if he would like it, but I would like to play one of my games with him. A couple years back, we made a game called After the Rain. You might have heard me talk about it on this channel, or even heard it mentioned in some publications, which was pretty cool. But one of the things that I wanted to do was make a big psychological role-playing game where you don't gain stats, you lose stats. So characters have these things called facets. They can go as high as 6, and they can go as low as 0. And they can be anything, right? A relationship, a religious belief, anything, right? But if a thing hits 0, it is like it has never existed at all. And I think Carl Jung would find that fascinating, to watch people roleplay as someone who is drastically different at the beginning of the game versus somebody who's drastically different at the end. If I can regale you with one story, the first time that we played this game, someone had vengeance set to 6. Somebody, an NPC, had wiped out their family, and their last scene was them basically getting the ending shot on that character as the vengeance went from 6 to 0. And the last time that we saw that character, they were standing over this person's body in the pouring rain with a smoking gun and had no idea why they did it. And I think Carl Jung might find that fascinating. And if you find that fascinating, because it's Gen Con, I'd like to do this at least once a year as a thank you to all of you guys for, I don't know, just another good year. After the Rain is 50% off, so it's like $4 if you want the game. But yeah, that's over on itch.io. The link will be hopefully on the screen if I do my job right. But in any case, folks, that does bring us to the end of today's video. Again, we got a Patreon, $10 a month. You get the historical Paleolithic role-playing game. We got a YouTube membership program. Lots of cool exclusive videos over there and new ones coming out every single week. But genuinely, if you've made it this far, just thank you for watching. It really does mean the world to me, and I really appreciate it. Also, you can get physical games from us too. But more importantly, thank you for being here. That's the big important thing. And thank you the most to my patrons. These are the hybrids, the ones that really keep the lights on. This is Agile Monk, Chris Bates, Dionysus, Kavadi, Dash, Chromatic Orbital Strike, Chris M, Commander Unidentified, Dartra, Viralder, Ashley Smith, Ara, Bruce, Matthias, Putnam, the members of the Dad Bod, Alex.VKSH, Solution, Arcane Bard, Carl Aegis, David Z, Talath, Cadme, Cheris, Blood Sparrow, Warlord, Matthew Anderson, and Derek, and of course all of my YouTube members. Thank you all so much for being here, guys, and for continually making it harder for me to cram all of you onto one slide. Eventually I'm going to have to do 2 slides, which is going to be pretty great. But in any case, thank you all again so much for watching. I'm Kyle Ott for Desks and Dorks. You all have been absolutely amazing. If you see me at Gen Con, don't hesitate. Come say hello. But I'll see you in the next one. You've all been absolutely amazing. Peace.